Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm well, Monica. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I want to welcome everybody to our session called Soundbites for Immigration Success. This is a podcast series designed to help you grow your business, learn about your colleagues, and hear their challenges and solutions to their stories. So I have with me today the incomparable Peter Veress.
Thank you.
But I'm going to let Peter introduce himself. Peter, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then follow that up with what made you decide to become an immigration consultant?
Yeah, you bet. So my name is Peter Veress. I've been in the immigration field for 33 years, if you can believe it. And I started out as an immigration officer back in 1989. Sounds like 1889, but it's 1989. And I was with the department for a number of years. I left the department and then started. I went into private practice, and I went into private practice with the then CIC manager where I was, and we both started. And when immigration consulting was brand new, it was a new thing. There weren't a lot of them. In fact, we kind of pioneered. We were one of the we started kind of this sort of the immigration consulting thing here in Calgary. And then I sold my shares, I suppose, in that company, and then started Vermax, which is my current company, and I've been at it for now, about 15, 16 years under the brand, the Vermax brand. We specialize in 3 areas. We do corporate work, we do labor immigration, so temporary foreign workers, and we have a recruitment arm, and we also do business immigration.
Okay, so well, thanks for that story background. But what made you decide that you wanted to go into the profession when you were leaving your time as an immigration officer? What made you opt to go into the other side of the desk?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. So basically, from the beginning, what I wanted to do, my career goal was to go into the Foreign Service. And so, I did all the right things. I think I got a political science degree. I wrote my foreign service entrance exam. I went through all the interviews. I went, I jumped through all the hoops, and I just waited and waited for the government to come back and give me a job offer. And a year went by, a year and a half went by, and nothing. So I thought, I need to do something, in the interim. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try to go into the immigration department, because I thought, that was a nice stepping stone into the Foreign Service later on. So I was working, so I had a contact, and, long after, to cut a long story short, got into the department and was able to start working as an immigration officer. And then about 3 years into my I suppose my tenure at the department at CIC, which was the IRCC back then, I got a call from the department, and they said from the Foreign Service, and they said, "Oh, are you willing to come back now? And we're ready to give you an offer." And I thought at that time, and I started to do a little bit of research. And it turned out the Foreign Service was not what I thought it would be. When I started doing the research, I realized that it's a lot about writing reports and things. And I was really enjoying my time at the immigration department because of that contact that I had with people, that direct, window into the world. And I was so, it was so exciting. And I thought, maybe this is what I want to do, and not the Foreign Service. I had this idea of the Foreign Service being, I'm going to walk around and we're going to solve all sorts of international conflicts and be very important and all this. And when I started doing the research, it was like, oh, so this is not what it is. I'm not going to be jet setting around the world trying to resolve conflicts and things. And so I looked at it. I did a bit of a long walk in the snow, as we say, and I thought, no, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And yeah, the rest is really history. And one more thing, Monica. I looked and I said, okay, so what do I want? What do I want out of a career, out of a job, or a career, more importantly? And I really looked at, and I said, look, I want 6 things that I want from any career. And one was certainty. I wanted to make sure that, you know what, I'm going to have, you know, a job. This is not going to end tomorrow. This is not going to be, I'm not going to be, you know, replaced by some machine. Although that still yet to be seen whether we are or not, but I don't think we will. And the other thing it was variety. You know, every day was a different thing. Every person that came to you came with a different problem, or at least with a similar problem, but with different circumstances. And I love that. And, you know, no 2 days were the same. And the other thing I looked at was this connection. Do I have a connection to what I'm doing? And I thought, yeah, you know, I speak 3.5 languages. I've been an immigrant myself, and not just once, but 3 times. So I'm a professional immigrant. And I thought, yeah, this is really cool. And the other thing, and I think the most important thing that I was seeking in any type of career was meaning and significance. I wanted to know that what I'm doing makes a difference. And I knew that if I was to opt for the Foreign Service, I'd be sort of a yes man for the government of the day, right? Because that's what you do. You're a bureaucrat out there somewhere, and you're just basically following their rules and whatever message was to be done at the time. And so meaning, you know, and we know how, and all of a sudden I realized that in immigration, you realize that you don't show up and people's dreams and aspirations, you know, gets sidetracked, and the role that we play in making sure that doesn't happen, to me, was almost intoxicating, right? It was just very, very cool. And the last 2 things that I thought any career should offer would be an opportunity to grow. And you know, we're like plants. We're either growing or dying, right? So I thought, no, and you know, and I look back and I think of where I am now and where I was when I started. It is, you know, it's a scream from where I was, right? I have so much more knowledge now, I can be so much more resourceful, and I can present those alternatives and options to people, and I think that is so cool. And finally, and the final thing is contribution. You know, the career has to offer you an opportunity to contribute. And, you know, when you think about what we do, it is so cool, because we're not only contributing to the person, obviously, to our client, but to the community that we belong to the profession, and by extension, the country. Right? I mean, what other job gives you that opportunity, that possibility? And I don't want to sound like this is, you know, I'm being, you know, overly trying to make myself too important or make ourselves too important, but it is. I mean, at the end of the day, you are shaping the landscape of this country. What could be cooler than that?
It is so cool, and it is so evident, your passion for what you do. And I wrote those down, and I think these are key takeaways anybody listening today should take up. So for Peter, the 6 things, when he thought about his career, he wanted certainty, he wanted variety, he wanted a connection, he wanted meaning and significance. He wanted an opportunity to grow, and he wanted an opportunity to give back, to contribute. So, Peter, I want to say, certainly from where you are, 30 years later, you've certainly met all those standards. So I guess that's a great segue into, obviously, over a 30-year career, you've come across many challenges. And I want to ask you maybe what you see as your biggest challenge. Feel free to sort of, if you want to break it up into 2, maybe at the start of your career, or maybe it's mid-career, because I know you've had some challenges mid-career as well. Mm-hmm. What has it been for you, and how did you solve it? What were the strategies you took to sort of solve that challenge?
Absolutely. And before I answer that question, Monica, I just want to put a little disclaimer. That those six sort of needs from a career come from an author, Anthony Robbins. I don't know if you heard, and he applies it to a different context, but I've applied it to my career, and I think, just to give credit where credit is due, those 6 needs are really, you know, somebody who's already thought of this, and I just applied it to our profession and my career. But to answer your question, what have been the biggest challenges? And I think this is a good question and a difficult one to answer, but I do believe my biggest sort of career challenges have been reconciling the practice management, the business of the business, and the technical aspect of of the career, sort of sort of the legal side of things and the technical side of things and the business side of things. And that's always a challenge, because you obviously have to have you have to be very competent in your field in order to be a good practitioner and to be a good consultant. I mean, that's not an option any longer. You have to be outstanding in your field, and you must really be able to give those alternatives and options, and at the same time manage the business that actually sells that technical expertise. And that's not an easy thing to do. For example, and the biggest challenges I've had is building a company, a practice, and maintaining, sort of the training expertise and making sure that, that the cash flow comes in. And those two things seem almost, incompatible, because if you're a good technician, yeah, that's great, except that you need to know how to sell that technical knowledge in a very, in the context of a very tight regulatory environment. And that's it. And that's a transition or a combination, I suppose, a lot of immigration consultants struggle with, and I'm no exception. When you are, the CEO of your company, but at the same time, you're also a practitioner and you're also imparting information, how do you balance those two things? And how do you make sure that you have always the best interest of your client at heart? And that sometimes conflict with trying to make a profit and so on, and sort of finding that balance is critical. And it took me the better part of 20 years to get it somewhat right.
Well, that's interesting you say that, and I agree with you. A lot of practitioners struggle with, they have some great knowledge and great experience to sort of share, but they struggle with sort of running their business, like how to run the business, how to manage the business. And then there's that age-old question of, are you an entrepreneur versus an entrepreneur in a business versus a practitioner? So it's marrying both of those. So you said it took you 20 years to sort of get to a comfort level, to a place to where you feel comfortable wearing both hats. So how did you do that? Was it by surrounding yourself with people who maybe have more of that business skill and you focus on the practitioner side, or did you just gain that experience yourself? How did you come to a place where you feel happy?
No, that's a good question. It was partly through trial and terror.
Trial and terror.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little anecdote, Monica. This is an interesting one, and for those of you listening, I think you may either relate to this or be horrified by this. But I remember back, I don't know, 25 years ago, when we were just starting out and we were growing by leaps and bounds and things were going well, and we had a big contract that paid, I don't know, $100,000, which back then was huge money. I mean, still is a lot of money, but back then it was even more money. And that check, because it was on back then it was, written checks and so on, and that check bounced. And it was okay, and it gets better. Hang on, it gets better. So the check is not honored. It bounces. It has no funds from our client, who was a big client, but still, obviously, the check bounced. And it was Christmas Eve, and we had to do payroll, and we had no money because that's what we were counting on. We had already done all the work. That money was coming in to pay that month's, sort of bills. And I remember going to the bank on Christmas Eve to ask for a line of credit to be able to just keep the lights on. And I remember walking down going, oh, what am I doing? And then by the time I got to the bank, I had to give, my house up for collateral. I had, for it's $100,000, right? So my house up for collateral or for security, collateral security. I had to borrow my brother's stocks that he had on his company for me to secure the loan. And at that point, I had to make it. And that was sort of a very defining moment. And I thought, okay, do I want to continue being self-employed? Do I want to continue doing this entrepreneur thing? Or do I just want to be a practitioner and continue to to work, as a really for somebody else, a law firm, whatever. At the time, I was like, and then at that time, I made a decision. So I said, no, both can be done. And then to answer your question, Monica, I sought out some mentors and created a little bit of a board of directors, if you will, for my company, so that I could go and sort of bounce ideas off them and keep myself accountable to somebody other than myself. And that's so important, and if I can give you a piece of advice, guys, do that. Make sure that you're accountable to somebody. Even if you own your own practice and you've been at it for a long time, get yourself a group of mentors. And yeah, you got to pay these guys and pay these men and women who are going to sit with you once every quarter and tell you, okay, so how are we doing? What are you doing? Are you doing things right? Are you, is there anything that you should be worried about? How do you, how are you managing? And that accountability, even though you're still the boss and you're still the owner, it's so critical to be responsible to somebody else for the promises that you're making to your company.
So great advice. And I love the fact that you shared a story, and it goes to show that, even what you view as the most successful or seasoned practitioners go through many of the same problems. But Peter, a lot of people listening will come back and say, that sounds great, Peter, but that they struggle in finding mentors, or they struggle in finding someone to sort of sit with them. And a lot of newer consultants won't necessarily have the cash flow to be able to do that. So what would you say they would do? How would they, make themselves accountable? Could it be a relative? Could it be a spouse?
Absolutely, it could be, but it should be somebody who has a pedigree in somebody who knows more about the business, about business itself than you, because obviously you don't want to go to someone who obviously doesn't have much to offer. I mean, they may be the nicest people on the planet, but unless they're going to be, they have been there where you want to go. And when you say, people who struggle with the business side of things, yeah, it is a struggle. It is hard work. It's not easy. And you really have to think about where do you want to be in this field. And there's all sorts of options. So I would, and I think, it's interesting because first of all, there is a really good community for immigration consultants, and that is CAPIC. And I don't want to, I'm not being paid for this, although I should. And Monica, if you want to send me a check, that would be very nice. But but I'm not. But CAPIC is a good resource where you can phone and you can check and you can bounce ideas. And if it's not a board, for the first little while, if you get a mentor, that mentor will typically work with you without asking anything. But as you're starting to meet certain milestones and you start to benefit from the advice that you're getting, you're growing your company. And my advice would always be compensate people well. So if there's somebody who contributes to your growth and your success, you make sure that you compensate that, because that's going to be something that is going to be really good for you.
And would you say other options, of course, along of being part of a community such as CAPIC, you can also seek mentors. Maybe they're not necessarily in the immigration space, but maybe people who have been successful entrepreneurs in their own right, like what worked for them, marketing techniques. So there's places like chambers of commerce, local business networks.
Yeah, and sometimes it's even better when your mentor is not necessarily from your industry, because they think a different way, and now sometimes we get tunnel vision and we just think, oh, this is the only way. I'll give you an example. One of our mentors, or my mentor, is an 86-year-old man who was in oil and gas for all his life, made a ton of money, and was able to and managed a large corporation, and is now just volunteering his time to help young guys and young entrepreneurs, and he's the one that I sometimes talk about, and he's the one that's been famous for saying, Peter, tell me the good news and the bad news, we can make money on both. And that's an entrepreneur right there. This is a guy who's not going to, oh my God, the minister said this today, and he's going like, okay, so how do we make money off that? How do we monetize the bad news?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's of course keeping in mind, as you say, the tight regulatory framework, and remembering that we we're dealing with people and their
Yeah.
lives and their stories. So I guess, Peter, we've gone well over the 15 minutes I've allocated, but that's okay because it's been very interesting. And I know people will love to hear your sage words of wisdom. But I want to let you have the final word here and say, what would be your final piece of advice or words to somebody who's just starting off, just entering the profession?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if I was to answer that question, I would just say, do your research before you. I mean, if you're not in the business right now, if you're not an immigration consultant and you're not in the field, and even if you are, do your research. Find out what it is that you want to get from this, and then fact check it backwards. So you say, this is what I want to do, and then talk to people to find out whether what you want to do is doable within the profession. Because again, like Monica, you were mentioning, we are governed by a very strict set of rules, a very strict regulatory framework. So make sure you do your research, make sure you do you find the information that you want, double check that if what you're thinking you're getting into is what it is. And for that, there's no shortage of senior consultants who'd be happy to help you, myself included, in that, to make sure that, and the other thing you want to make sure about is that, for example, I've heard so many times people when I ask my students, why is it that you want to do immigration consulting? They say because they like people. That's not really an answer to me. Yeah, you can like people in many different things, but what you want to know is whether you are a practitioner, you are a technical person that enjoys the minutiae of the law and the subtexts and the sort of reading between the lines of very complex legal issues, or you like doing another aspect of immigration consulting. And you have to have a clear idea in your mind as to what you think you're getting into, and then make sure that you do the research to make sure that there is, that's something that you can live with and you can make a living at, because that's the question. Some people, and the beauty with our profession is that you could be many things. You don't have to be that policy, sort of wonk, I call them, like people who are really policy nerds and regulationers, and we all need those. But that's not the only thing that you could be doing. You could be working with, immigrant serving agencies. You can be working with students. You can be working with all sorts of areas. So just know what you're getting into and plan ahead, and then make sure you double check with people who've been in it and have done it, so to make sure that there are no disappointments at the back end.
Great words, Peter. Great words from the beginning to the end. I want to thank you for your time today, and we hope to see you next time. So thanks, Peter, and thank you to all listening.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.